Hello and welcome to the Creative Lotus Podcast. I'm your host, Alan Zaki.
I think there's so much value in collaboration. I feel like you can really elevate an art form and elevate a project when you're willing to collaborate and lean on the people around you who are, experts in their own fields and who are really good at what they do.
Hello and welcome to the Creative Lotus Podcast. On this week's episode, which is a bonus episode, we have photographer Aaron J. Young. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited to welcome back photographer Aaron J. Young. So welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming back.
Hey, thank you so much for having me again.
Absolutely. I feel like it's going to be funny because you're the first one to do this. And so all my guests from previous seasons, I'm probably going to get a call like, hey, I want to be on another episode. I want to talk. So yeah, this might start something that's great. So yeah, what's been going on? I know that you have some exciting news to share about a project that you've been working on. And I know that we can kind of dive into that, but I'll let you do the honors. So please.
The big thing that's going on right now is I have a book that is finally available for pre-order. That's been in the works for quite a while, especially with COVID. And yeah, it's just really incredible that it's, that's finally happening, that people can finally order the book. We had an event in LA over the last couple of days where people could actually, physically look at the book. And yeah, it's just really incredible that it's finally here.
Amazing. Yeah, I think I saw you were at DragCon, right, here in LA?
Yeah, so we were at DragCon because the book is called Queen, and it's actually a collection of photographs that I took of portraits of queens over the years at DragCon. So we thought it was, like the perfect full circle moment to actually sort of be introducing it to the world at the same event that, that we sort of created the project.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, so I would love to kind of talk about the creative process and everything. I know that on last season when we kind of spoke for the interview and everything, you'd shared that, the process of, connecting with subjects and everything and really kind of immersing yourself, with them as you're taking these portraits. So I'm curious kind of like if you can share some of how did you go about creating these amazing portraits of these, drag superstars really that have been on the show and have been able to really kind of capture their essence in a very kind of crowded place like, DragCon here in LA and in New York.
Yeah. So I guess it kind of really started in 2016, I believe. I think that was maybe the first, it was either the first or second year that DragCon existed. And so that was the only year that I've ever gone just as a spectator, just to see it all. And when I was there, I had this idea, like it would be really, it would be the perfect place to be able to photograph a lot of queens, especially the queens, that are from RuPaul's Drag Race and, that are constantly traveling and have really busy schedules. And they all kind of come together at this one location for 3 days. So,
right.
So the following year in 2017, we decided to have a booth that was sort of like a little photo studio setup. And we found that it was actually somewhat difficult to get the queens to come to our booth because they're at their own booths, they're meeting their fans. That's really the reason why they're there, And so they have really busy schedules. So it was hard for them to step away and to come find us. And we were still able to photograph some people, and we got some beautiful photographs that year. But it was really out of that challenge of, not really having accomplished the goal that I had in mind, that another idea came to me, which was, what if we could take a setup and sort of create a photo studio where they were located or all around the convention center. So that's where this idea came to kind of put together a team of people. And then we had a small backdrop on like a rolling stand. And then I had one person who was working the light and and then we'd have somebody who was in charge of like model releases, somebody sometimes who was in charge of capturing BTS video. And so we would just roll around the convention center and we'd roll up to a Queen's booth and we would talk to their team and be like, hey, we're here and we're, we just need them for 30 seconds, and we can take a beautiful portrait. So, people were pretty receptive to it. They were able to, step away for, a really short period of time. Sometimes we would actually go back into their booth because, depending on who it was, there was varying degrees of how extensive their booths were. And some of them, you had to actually walk pretty far into like a maze to kind of get to the back where they were. And so there were times when they said, why don't you just bring it all back to them? And so we ended up starting to create these portraits that were, in my opinion, a lot more interesting because, we were out at all these different locations, and oftentimes the famous queens would have a big line of people waiting to meet them. So we would bring the queen out, and then we'd incorporate some of their fans into the shots. And it just made for this really interesting sort of way of capturing them. So that was in 2018. And then so we just kept doing that, basically. Like we did it a couple of times in LA. We did it once in New York before the pandemic happened. We even went back last year. Last year was the first year that we officially got shut down as being a fire hazard.
Whoa! What?
I mean, every year we have the same conversation with literally the same person about the fact that we're in a little bit of a gray area because the convention center does consider our setup to be big enough to be a fire hazard as we're rolling around the convention. We can usually talk them into letting us continue to do it. But last year, on the second morning of the event, they were like, we really can't let you continue to roll around. But they were really nice about it. They put us in a booth for free, and they let us kind of just hang out there. And so that was the first year where we really got to see like how the perception around what we've doing has changed over the years. Because in 2017, we could barely get anybody to come to us.
Right.
Even sometimes the people that we knew personally. And then in when was that? That was 2022. We had to do the same thing, basically. We had to just go out and talk to people and tell them where we were at. And we were able to photograph almost everybody that we wanted to photograph last year. Wow. They were all willing to, to take time away from their booths to show up and to be photographed. A lot of them knew the project, and they didn't know that a book was happening, but they had seen the project on like out.com or, the Wow Report or wherever. So it was just over the years sort of like building this presence online and people becoming aware of this project that we kept doing every year. It grew into this thing that then people wanted to be a part of.
No, thank you for sharing that. I think, it's so unique, kind of what you've created over the years. And to be honest, when you were sharing it, I totally forgot that we like even had a pandemic in the sense the RuPaul's Drag Race or like the DragCon got shut down, right? So last year was kind of their start back up post-COVID.
The re-entry, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's amazing. I mean, from starting when it started in 2016 to now, like having, your freedom to like pretty much get anyone you want for your project is pretty cool. So I'm curious, kind of the specific look and feel of the portraits is very you. Like the lighting is very much like your style, and I can kind of point it out and everything. And but I'm curious, kind of why the portrait background in this environmental. It's almost like this juxtaposition, right? Of like this crazy big convention center, and then you have these fans, which is really cool. But then it's almost like an intimate studio portrait of them. Was that kind of a decision based on like the work that you've done before, or like going into it where you just kind of like, this is the best way for me to create the kind of work that I create on a bigger scale that's kind of like on the go?
I think it was a combination of everything. Like it is very much my style. And, along with the technical and visual aspect of my style, I feel like it also encompasses, or like when I describe my style of photography, portrait photography, I think of it as really connecting deeply with my subjects and then capturing their energy coming through the photograph. That to me is actually more important than the lighting and the technical aspects, just because if the connection is not there with your subject, then for me a photo just falls flat, no matter how technically beautiful it was captured. In capturing people in that way, there's a level of authenticity that comes along with that. It's authenticity. You're capturing someone's humanity. You're capturing an energy about them, sort of like their essence, which is something that I think is more something you feel rather than see, which is always an interesting thing in my mind of like, I'm trying to sort of capture an energy that you really feel coming through a visual medium. And so since that's kind of like what I'm all about and what my style is, when I was thinking about photographing the drag queens, back in 2016, 2017, I hadn't really seen that done before. I hadn't seen the drag race, or not the drag race, but the drag community really photographed in that way. Like I had seen a lot of drag photography that was sort of what I would think of when I think of drag photography, like, a queen captured very much in the persona of who they are. A lot of times that's really camp, that's really humor driven. A lot of times the photographs really played that up. Like if they were playing a character, then the styling of the photograph and everything would be centered around that idea, which is beautiful. And that's a wonderful way to capture them. In my mind, I was like, can I capture them in a way that is going to, you're going to obviously see their artistry, you're going to see their drag personas, but can I do it in a way that you can also feel the human behind the persona and feel that humanity coming through the photograph? So that was kind of my goal. I love using, you can see I'm sitting in front of one, but I love using these painted backdrops. They're just very like the things that I'm the most drawn to with portrait photography is when something feels classic and feels timeless and feels elegant and feels poetic. That's what I'm personally drawn to. So that's sort of what is always in my mind and what my goal of creating is. And to me, using like these painted backdrops is just a way to do that visually. And I had done it before. We're just taking, and I'm not the only person who's done this. Lots of people have done this. Taking backdrops on location or wherever. And especially in the last few years, it's become even more popular. But like, it's it was just kind of this vision that I had, I guess, to see like if I could capture this community in a way that I would personally find really interesting and that I hadn't seen so much of up to that point. And then the whole aspect of like, getting fans in the photographs and other people in the photographs, that sort of came about on the spot the first year that we did it. And it just seemed like a really cool idea to like be able to, it's almost like in my mind, this commentary on the celebrity aspect of who these people some of these people have become, they now have these huge fan bases and, they're also, they really drive pop culture in a lot of ways. So I just thought it was this interesting, like, I don't know what you call it, like a study or like aspect to the photographs of showing them with this backdrop that almost sort of separates them in a way from the other people that are in the shot. And I feel like it kind of creates that visual story or idea. So
yeah. No, thank you for explaining it. You said it so well. And I think that the portraits to me really, talk to what you're talking about, which is you bring this elegance and really kind of the humanity to, these artists that do drag and really show kind of who they are as individuals and not just like this characterization of them. Because to your point, I think that a lot of drag, you just see it's like on a poster, right? So it's very like commercially high glam, kind of overproduced, and very character driven because it's, they're going to do a show or they're, promoting something. But to kind of like bring a sense of almost like reality, if you will, to the portraits in this kind of setting, I think is really beautiful. And it definitely shows like you. And I think the connection to the fans of these drag stars is really cool because you really get to kind of see like them in their environment. But like you said, it almost separates them because they're on this backdrop and then like their audience is kind of also watching in on what they're doing. So it's pretty awesome. I'm curious kind of why the title Queen. It seems so obvious, but I'm wondering if, you kind of have a specific reasoning for it or if it was, something that you had worked on and just kind of curious, and for something like this, which is a book that is, like a coffee table size book, I'm sure there's a lot of people kind of involved in the process. So maybe if you can kind of expand on that, it'd be great.
Sure. So the title Queen came about because, we spent months brainstorming, like the publisher and I brainstorming just all kinds of ideas and like what it could possibly be called, and nothing felt right to me. And this was sort of the most straightforward and the simplest title, but it felt like it encompassed everything, because the word queen, obviously it relates to drag queens, but also queen, there's this idea of like royalty, and I feel like that's kind of what has happened with drag in the last decade, especially with RuPaul's Drag Race. Like I feel like it's elevated the art and brought it into the mainstream in a way that it wasn't before.
Right.
so it just, I don't know, it was the only thing for me that actually seemed to work as a title. There was like so many other possibilities, but it just, nothing felt like the right fit. And yeah, I mean, the book is really a collaboration between the publisher, editor, me, retoucher, I mean, if you go out further than that, then, the teams of people involved in actually creating the photographs themselves each year. There were a couple of people who were consistent every single year from the beginning, and then a couple of people, that would, get switched out. And so it's those people, and it's really, a collaborative effort more than anything, especially when it came time for the book part of it to happen. It's like, I have no idea what, that's not my expertise. So I had to rely heavily on the other people who had those expertise, like the editor who's, the book has this beautiful flow of photographs, and that's really because of the publisher and the editor together and their expertise, and, just relying on the publisher because obviously they know what they're doing when it comes to just making a book in general. So I've gotten to, give my creative input, and I have to ultimately sign off on everything, all the creative choices. But I think there's so much value in collaboration. I feel like you can really elevate an art form and elevate a project when you're willing to collaborate and lean on the people around you who are, experts in their own fields and who are really good at what they do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm curious, kind of, going kind of back, if you will. So, this started as kind of a personal project, but I guess at like what point did you really feel like, the collection that you've created of all these portraits of, these drag superstars and drag queens, across the nation, when did it kind of come to fruition that like, oh, this could really become a book to kind of celebrate that, and the creative process that you've, put many years into kind of being able to display it?
I mean, so the first year that we actually had the roaming sort of set up was the first year that I had my own kind of idea that this could one day become a book. And so that was 2018, I guess. And so at that time I had actually started writing down my goals. And so part of like my morning routine was to, read my goals out loud and sort of take a moment to really visualize, all of them as though they're already here and they've already come true. And one of the things that I'd written down is that my first coffee table book, that was the drag queen work, had been published and had been widely received in a positive way. And so that was something that I just read to myself every morning and visualized for about 2 years maybe, while I just kept creating the work, because I thought this work is going to be, it's going to just exist, and if a book ever does happen, it'll be ready, and I'll just keep building on it. I'll just keep creating, and then that in my mind, I thought that will just give this idea the possibility to become even greater, because we'll have more portraits to choose from, and we can just continue to sort of elevate this concept. And so so it started off there, and then something that I really believe strongly about is, one, writing down goals, visualization, and then also like letting go of how those goals are going to actually come to fruition, because like my ideas are incredibly limited compared to, how vast the universe is. I feel like when I come up with an idea of how I can get to a certain place or accomplish a certain goal, it's probably like the tiniest little percentage or fraction of like what's actually possible. So I try to remember that and just like let go of thinking that I know how it's going to happen, but also still take action in that direction and be open to, something somewhere else, showing up. And so I had actually had a couple of meetings with publishers that I had set up through people that I knew, and they were like, oh, this work is really beautiful, but not right for us. And so that was me just kind of taking action and pursuing this idea. And then in 2020, my now publisher, he actually found me because they were wanting to do a coffee table book that had to do with the drag community. And so they had gone searching just for like what exists out there, and they'd come across my work. And because some of this had already been posted on like out.com, and that sort of led them to me. And then they actually contacted me. And that's actually how that started, which I think is really, it's it kind of blew my mind because, you know, I'm out here like reaching out to like the people that I think I can reach out to. And in the meantime, here's somebody off in left field that's like finding me, that, you know, that is being attracted to me from a whole different angle that I could have never seen coming.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, you're talking about what this whole podcast is really about, which is like the idea of this lotus flower and the causality, right? So like for every cause you're making, an effect is registered instantaneously in the universe, you know? And so to your point, I think you're talking about kind of like the vastness of the universe is so large, so we can't kind of fathom it. But like you said, you're taking action and doing something to manifest that in your life, right? And so then the universe literally responded by having this person looking for the thing that you're trying to produce, you know, and make it into something, you know? So that's incredible. I love that. What was that process like? I mean, I don't even know how many portraits you've taken, but I'm sure it's hundreds and hundreds, you know, at all the conventions over the years. But like, how does that then get whittled down with your editors, you know, and your team, if you will, to create this book? Because I don't know how many pages the book is as of right now, but yeah, I'm just curious, kind of how did that work for you?
So so the book is 200 pages. That's not 200 photographs, but like from cover to cover is 200 pages. So, you know, I'm not exactly sure the exact number of photographs, but it's up there. I mean, it's maybe 150, 100, something like that. I mean, 160. It's a lot. I think nice. By the time that I got or the publisher got in contact with me, I think I had over 200 portraits that I'd shot. So the first thing was like me just going through all of the work and like just seeing is, okay, are there any that are an absolute, you know, that I can't see being in the book, just to kind of like separate some stuff out, because, you know, obviously it's like, you know, just like if you do photograph anybody, it's not like every single photo is going to be like the winning shot type of a thing. And so there had to be some sort of process of illumination. And so I kind of went through, did that for myself. The publisher went through did that as well. We kind of compared notes to see like where we were both at, like how much of an overlap there was. Yeah. We both had certain portraits that we sort of fought for. That, nice. You know, there were portraits that he really thought like had to be in the book that I was like, oh, I'm not sure about this. I'm just not sure if it's as strong as some of the other work. And then vice versa, there were portraits that I was like, I really want these portraits in the book. And he was like, I'm not sure about it.
Wow.
So, you know, it was just this ongoing collaborative effort and lots of conversations, lots of meetings, lots of kind of like talking to each other about why we thought that they worked for the book or didn't work for the book, and then finding some sort of compromise. You know, ultimately, I'm really happy with what was chosen. You know, I'm really happy with all of the portraits that ended up there, and I think that we ultimately like landed on the best possible decisions. But yeah, it was just a collaborative process, really. You know, where we just had to continue to do the meetings after meetings after meetings, and.
Does name recognition come into play when you're kind of finalizing these things or choosing the photos? Because, you know, majority of, like, if not all of them are probably really well known, you know, portraits or subjects, I should say. But, you know, obviously some are more well known than others, or kind of had a longer stay on a show or have done all stars or whatever. So does that kind of play into how you choose, or is it really based on, once again, like you said, you're about the connection of the subject to you and, you know, taking this portrait that kind of represents them?
I mean, it does come into play in the sense that every year, like, I've had the queens that I really want to photograph. And along with that, though, I'm always just looking for interesting people that are there. I mean, so it's not a requirement by any means. Like, people do not have to be famous. They don't have to be on Drag Race. They don't have to be, like, I'm just looking for people that are interesting, really, you know, and people that sort of are part of a broader spectrum of what drag really is, as an art form. Right. And it encompasses so much, you know. There are drag kings, there are people who are trans that also do drag. There are people that primarily do like sort of like a spooky or like scary drag as their thing. There are people that are all about, you know, looking as much or as feminine as they possibly can, and just like the beauty of it. So it's just like there's a lot of other things in between. And so I always wanted to encompass as much as I possibly could. And, but since Drag Race is a thing and it exists and that's sort of like, pushed the whole art form into the mainstream, I also wanted to include that, but I didn't want the book to just be like a Drag Race book. Because I don't think that that's a broad enough I just don't think that's a broad enough representation of drag as a whole, because there's only been 150 years whatever drag queens on Drag Race, and there's thousands of drag queens that exist all over the world now. So so it was a combination. It was like, of course we wanted recognizable people in the book, mm-hmm. and I also wanted people that weren't recognizable in the book, and it didn't matter how recognizable they were. If the photograph fell flat, then they weren't going to make it into the book. Because again, it comes back to, the connection has to be there, And so if I would have photographed whoever and they would have been, super famous, but it just, for whatever reason, if I would have failed at that shoot, then it just wouldn't have been able to make the cut. Because I really wanted the body of work to just be as strong as possible.
No, it makes total sense. I'm curious, kind of like, how did you come to the decision? I think it's Bianca Del Rio on the cover, correct? I'm looking at it, and I think that's her.
Yeah, I can actually.
Yeah.
I have the copy right here, so I can just show you.
Yes!
This is one of 3 copies that exist right now because, it's pre-order right now. So, so Bianca's on the cover.
Gorgeous.
And,
love it.
we wanted to go with Bianca because she is one of the most recognizable faces of drag right now, and she's also a wonderful human being. She's incredibly kind. She's every time that I've interacted with her, got to work with her, she's just really sweet and really kind, and that is, for me, that goes a long way. So we just thought that she would be a good fit for the cover if she was down to do it, and luckily she said yes to that, and so that's kind of how that came about.
Awesome. I'm curious, just on the technical side of things, I know that you said you kind of, with your team, you had like releases and stuff. Like, was that ever a hindrance or a problem with some of these queens because of who they are? Or was everyone kind of jumped on board and had no issue with it because that was just kind of expected and mandatory in order for you to photograph them?
Almost everybody was okay with signing a model release. There are a select couple that are, can you send it to my manager or whatever? And the reality is we're shooting in a public space. So when I was originally creating this work, to share it with out.com or to share it myself, like, I don't technically need a model release because it's such a public domain that it's happening. So it wasn't like, as the years have gone on, I've gotten much more strict about that, though, because with the idea that this is going to become a book, I'm never like, okay, we need model releases. So now I try to have somebody designated that that's their job, is just, get them to sign the model release at all costs, which is like, it's not that big, it's not that hard to do. Most of them are just happy to do it, and we're good,
Nice.
And it's also a way for me to keep track of everybody, because I know a good portion of the queens. Who they are. It's just, we photograph a lot of people at each one of these events, and there's queens that aren't necessarily famous or whoever, and I always want to just make sure that I'm able to represent them accurately and that they get the credit that they deserve. So it's like, I always, it's just a way to keep track of everyone as well and make sure that I'm getting everybody's, performer name correctly when this goes out and is seen, on a bigger scale.
Yeah. Do you have any interaction, or have you had any interaction with RuPaul because it was, shot at these drag cons, which is with, her title and name on it? Or is it kind of just, it's all been not reportage by any means, but like it's been kind of a separate thing that you've not had any interaction with?
So short answer is no, I haven't. I actually, my whole introduction to drag was actually working on RuPaul's Drag Race about over a decade ago. Yeah, so I started working on RuPaul's Drag Race back when they were filming season 3 of the show. I had just moved to Los Angeles. I had I had never seen a drag queen in real life, I don't think, because I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania. I didn't honestly know much about RuPaul. I knew the name, but I just, I was I just didn't have much experience with the gay community or the drag community or anything with where I grew up. And so that was really like my introduction to this whole world. I was really quickly blown away by it because it was just the artistry, the creativity. I mean, I would be on set in the workroom while they're like doing whatever their challenge is. And I was just like, even watching them like do what they're doing in such a short period of time, I was still like, I don't know how they're doing this. Like, I don't feel like I could ever do what they're doing. Like, it's just, there's so much that you have to be good at in order to be a good drag queen, you know. Like, it's about performing, it's about the look, it's about, I mean, a lot of these people can sew, they are designers, they are incredible makeup artists, they are incredible hairstylists, like they do all of it. I don't know of another art form that encompasses so many individual different things that you have to know how to do in order to be really good as a whole, to do it well. And so I just thought that they were incredible. I was like, these are some of the most incredible humans I've ever come across, you know. So I was working on the show as the stills photographer, and so I did that season 3, 4, 5. I did the first season of All Stars. I did a season of Drag U. That was a show that lasted for a couple of seasons where they would give I think it was only women, if I remember correctly, but I could be wrong about that. Like, women. They would 3 women would have a drag professor. They'd give them a makeover, and that was actually, to work on that show was one of the funnest experiences, because just being witness to these people going through like this internal transformation was really cool. So during that time, I got to know Rue a little bit, because I was so like, I had not really been on set before. So I'm like showing up on set, not really sure like how to do it, like what's the etiquette. Like, I just didn't know anything. So when I look back, I'm like, oh yeah, I was one of the only crew members that would talk to RuPaul. And now that I think about it, I'm like, I probably wasn't, I don't know that there's probably some rule that I wasn't aware of, but nobody came down on me for it, luckily.
That's good. Yeah.
So in doing that, like we at the time sort of became these like friends, I would say. And at the time, he also lived in West Hollywood, where I lived, like one of his places was on the same street that I lived on. And so we would run into each other just, you know, in day-to-day life, and we would like kiki, and we would like, you know, say hi to each other, give each other a hug and all that stuff. And it was really beautiful, you know, and we had conversations about spirituality and about like all kinds of interesting things. And and then when I stepped away from the show, you know, I didn't see him that much after that. And then as the years went on, I mean, that was a long time ago. So as the years have gone on, I've like seen him less and less, you know. And got it. So when Drag Race came around, I don't think I've ever even run into him at Drag Race. And as the years have gone on, Drag Race is a lot. I mean, it's an intense event. And so his involvement over the years has gotten a little bit less, which I totally understand. Because, you know, at the beginning, he was like, you could pay to get an autograph and a picture, and he was there all the time. And then now I think he cuts the ribbon at the beginning, and then he'll DJ some sets like at the main stage, and which is actually kind of genius, because he gets to just do what he loves and have fun, do music and like, just like have fun. And people get to actually like just celebrate and dance and have a good time. Again, that's like the long way to say, no, I have not. I haven't run into him. We also talked about like, do we want to see if we could like get RuPaul like to be on the cover? Or do we want to see if we could get RuPaul to write the intro? And it was just like, again, it came back to, I really love RuPaul. I just didn't want this to be looked at as a RuPaul's Drag Race book. I wanted it to be looked at as a book that's encompassing all of drag, that happens to have queens that were on the show. So that's kind of why we just didn't go that route of getting him involved. Yeah, that's so funny. Being on set, or any set really, right? Like, if you don't know any better, then it doesn't really hurt you, because going into something like that, you're just kind of like free to do whatever. And so, but now Rue is such a well-known person, and it's actually really funny. I just saw, I think yesterday, because of DragCon, you know, he did the ribbon cutting, and then literally like almost flubbed what season of All Stars that they were supposed to go and do, because he was like, what the hell season are we even on? Which I thought was hysterical, because it was kind of like, okay. I mean, there's so many seasons of the show. I mean, I don't think I'd be able to keep everybody straight, you know? Yeah. Let alone all the international versions of it as well. It's just like, it's a lot. Yeah. These portraits are amazing. I think it's so cool that you have such a variety and like eclectic, you know,
showing of different drag stars and drag performers. Do you see yourself, with the success of this, do you see yourself kind of taking it beyond just the drag cons that are going on and kind of like doing more, not intimate portraits, but doing more portrait sessions, maybe even going international and kind of going across, the waters to kind of expand this project even further?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how this book is received. It's only been a few days since the pre-release was announced, and we were at DragCon. I was there with my publisher and my team, and the reception was really awesome. So I think this book is going to be received well. So from there, anything could happen. My first thought this year while we were at, because we had to kind of stay close to our booth because of the walking fire hazard thing. And so we still captured, I think, about 60 portraits this year while we were like close by the book. Right. Which will be, I'm currently editing those right now. So hopefully within the next week and a half, they're going to go live somewhere, maybe out.com or something, so people can see those. But my first thought was like, okay, we've been shut down as a fire hazard in Los Angeles, but we haven't been shut down as a fire hazard in LA, or there's a UK drag race, or there's different places. So like, I don't know, it could, I'm open to anything and everything, so, if that takes us to, different places, and I think that there's definitely the potential to do more than one book. I think there's definitely the potential for like a second edition, or a volume 2 to happen. But that's pretty far off in the distance, Yeah. So I think right now our focus is just this book and getting this book out into the world, so that people can really see this body of work.
Yeah. Makes total sense. While you were talking, you kind of made me think of something, the difficulty, I guess, with doing personal projects, right? Which then, can, turn into something like this incredible book that you've created, usually costs, money. Like nothing's free, and especially living in Los Angeles or any major city. So I'm just curious, kind of like how does that kind of play out when you were doing this series? Because obviously I'm sure you had to get passes to go to every drag con, and also your team that you're bringing along with you. I can't imagine you're just giving them cookies and a nice cup of coffee and saying thanks so much, see you later. So like in the sense of like being able to produce this shoot, was it difficult for you to do, or was just kind of like your passion kind of drove it, and no matter whatever it cost, you were gonna make it happen?
I mean, it was about being resourceful mostly, because like in the first year when we got a booth, that was technically the most expensive year, and that was because we had to purchase booths. We had to then it was like, okay, now we have these booths. Like what? Like it can't just be an empty booth. Now we got to like do something with it. So we had to just like create something that was visually cool, and then the next year, whenever we were like, okay, like we're gonna roam around, that actually was a lot easier of an idea, because we didn't have, we were like, we're going to show up and just take photographs. We don't have to worry about like how it looks technically. We don't have to worry about styling a booth or anything like that. So I was always thinking, okay, like how can I make this happen, and how can I gain the access to photograph these people? How can I like give myself a little extra credibility with what I'm doing, and are there people out there who love drag enough that they'd be willing to volunteer? And so, so I every year it's mostly been me and my friends. It's been people who love the event, who want to be a part of it, and so we're this little team that show up and we get it done. And then each year, I have always teamed up ahead of time with Out Magazine, with Out.com. So like we'll do the event, and then in the following weeks, then they will run the photos online. And that then gave me the ability to get press credentials, which is what gave us the ability to even be there in the first place.
Nice.
This year was a little, and then also with the help of like World of Wonder, who's, the production company behind Drag Race, who I've known ever since, working on the show. They've been incredibly amazing, every single year. They've always been super helpful, especially this year in particular. Because this time we were having a booth, they gave us a great location. They helped promote the book. They've just always been really supportive of the project. So I'm really grateful to them as well. So that's kind of how we would do it. We'd get press credentials, we'd team up ahead of time, we would let everybody know what we were up to. And then this year was different just because, we had the book aspect that we were actually going to be plugging and selling. So
Awesome. Are they doing a DragCon in New York this year, or is it just LA? Do you know?
That's a really good question. I would imagine if it's happening, they'll probably announce it within like a week or two, because it seems like that's how it goes. There's usually like, you know, I don't know actually, because usually I remember when they did do DragCon in New York, I remember hearing about it like at the LA DragCon. They would already start plugging it. Right. So maybe not. I don't know. That's a really good question.
Yeah. No, I was just curious because I was kind of like, oh, if you were going to then get a booth, I guess, at the New York DragCon as well to be able to promote the book as well, it makes sense. But yeah, I don't know what's kind of going on. New York is its own kind of bucket of worms, if you will, when it comes to events and upfronts and press and stuff. Amazing. Okay, so I have to ask, I want some tea if you can share. What was one of the craziest situations you had while shooting this book? And what was one of the most amazing situations while shooting this book that you like is the highest of highlights for you?
Let's see. Crazy situations? I don't know. I mean, for the most part, the response when we were actually, as we shoot the project, has been really positive and really great. You know, I mean, I don't know how crazy this is, but, you know, as the years go on, as the queens become more famous, they become harder to actually, you know, get to, in a sense. Right. You know, a lot of the times it's like we're rolling up and we're talking to somebody on their team rather than them.
Right.
And oftentimes, like when we're talking, like the queens themselves are super sweet, and I get it. Like, you know, they're dealing with a lot that weekend, so they need a team and they need people to kind of funnel like what's happening and who gets access to them and all that stuff. But once we actually get to the queens, like the queens are mostly just very lovely people and very kind. And you know, there are queens now that I know that I met, you know, in the first couple of years of DragCon that I now see every year, and you know, it's nice to like reconnect for a moment. And then there's the queens that I've known for like, you know, like Manila Luzon, like I've known her for 10 years now.
Wow.
You know, people like that, like she's always been incredible. Like if I want to photograph her, if I can get in contact with her directly, like she's always down. You know, like she's always into it. She helped promote the book over the weekend a little bit. Like we took the book to a couple of the queens and we recorded some video of them talking about the book, and they, you know, she was really sweet. And I mean, this also isn't super crazy, but there were times whenever we would roll up to somebody's booth and they were like, okay, can you actually like come back into the booth to do the photo shoot? And there was like no space to actually make that happen. So we would take the backdrop off, and I would literally have somebody holding the backdrop, like standing behind it. And
wow, because
there just wasn't any room to like roll anything around. And so there were definitely times where we were like really cramped. And those actually sometimes turned out to be some of my favorite portraits, you know?
Nice.
So, I mean, again, that's not super crazy. That's not like the craziest tea ever.
I'm like, I was going to say, did someone throw a cup at you, or did anyone get crazy? Or actually, even the fans, was there a moment where like it got too intense with some of the fans that were there because the queens kind of come out, or anything like that?
There were a couple of times where like there's a photograph in the book of Shangela where it's probably it's one of the photos that has the most amount of people in the shot. And at that year, I think it was the year that she had, the last year that she did All Stars, and she had one of the biggest lines of people of anybody at that DragCon. And so when she came out, I mean, everybody was like, oh my gosh, she's out like in the open and whatever. And so we just used it to our advantage. Like we were like, okay, everybody like crowd around her, and she was wearing, I think she was dressed as like sort of a Game of Thrones kind of vibe. And so she had this sort of like flowy thing. We had the fans actually like toss it in the air to create this cool visual portrait. Yeah, I mean, for the most part, people are cool. Most of the time, people are wanting to be a part of it, you know? I'm sure there are fans that are going to get their hands on this book and then be pleasantly surprised to see their faces in the shots that they may not know that they had been a part of. Which, I mean, if I was a fan, I would think that was super cool, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I am a fan, but like, you know, I think that's just like a cool thing. In terms of like what was the coolest and like most like fun aspect, every year it's exhausting, and this year was a little different because I actually got sick leading up to the event. Normally I get sick right after the event because it's just like, you know, it's usually 3 days. This time it was only 2 days, but it's just, it's a lot of energy. You're dealing with a lot of people. It's a lot of hours. And so usually by the end, I'm just so wore out that I just need to crash for a little while. This time I got that out of the way before the event happened. And it was just the stress of, just putting this all together sort of, within a couple of weeks. But I'm just like, I just love that every year that we get to do what we're doing, Like, I don't know. It's just like, there's a part of it that like never gets old to me. Like the fact that we've been able to create this body of work, the fact that we've been kind of given the access that we have been given, the fact that all the entities involved have been so kind to us, like Out Magazine, World of Wonder, DragCon in general. Like, I just think it's really cool that we've been able to do this at all, And so when we're there and when we're capturing these portraits, and it's just fun, like it's fun to capture something really cool. And then like with, my little team, we're like, oh my God, we just, we get excited in the moment when we capture something that, is really cool, and we're all looking at it and we're just like, we get to, just have a good time. So yeah, so I don't know. I mean, like, I'm just grateful for this project as a whole. I'm grateful that it's been something that, I mean, it almost feels like a tradition now. Like every year when DragCon comes around, it's like, we're
here we go
doing this project. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And people on my team will reach out and be like, are we doing DragCon this year? Cause it's just kind of become this thing that, we've been doing it for so long that, I'm just grateful to be a part of it every year.
Awesome. So the last question I really have is kind of, was there anyone that, because you're a fan of, these queens, that you really kind of like fangirled or kind of had a moment of like, holy shit, I'm shooting this person? If so, kind of what was that experience like doing it?
I try not to treat anybody like they're a celebrity or like when I'm photographing them, because I don't know. I think there's value in just treating people human, and just being cool and just being like a kind, respectful human to another human. I think it goes a long way. It's a lot because we're photographing so many people. I mean, like last year, for instance, like I think we took like 120 portraits over the course of 3 days.
Holy
and
crap.
It was like that. I think that was the most we've ever taken. And the majority of them were actually from Drag Race that year. And it was like everybody from the last 2 or 3 seasons, it was just like, there were so many that it was like, it's kind of like a whirlwind where it's like, okay, so-and-so's coming over, like get ready and like meet them for 2 seconds, photograph them for a couple of minutes, and then they're back off to their, to their people. I mean, I think it's all really cool, I don't know. I mean, I'm just a fan of drag, I'm a fan of Drag Race. I'm a fan of like the art form. So I don't know. I mean, nobody's coming to my mind as like the queen that like is, somebody that I was like, oh my God. But it was more like everybody, it's more just like, the year, like last year when we photographed the entire cast of that season that had just aired. I mean, that's super cool to like, like that season of Drag Race's airing had just finished airing, and Willow Pill had been crowned the winner, and it's like, and here we are at DragCon, like photographing all of them, and it's just like more than one individual person. It's just like a really cool thing to photograph everybody, and in such a short period of time too. Yeah.
To have the access to them. Absolutely. Totally makes sense. Yeah. That's a lot of portraits to shoot. 120 people in one day is like, I can only.
Well, it was 120 people.
Period. Right.
3 days. Yeah. But still, I mean, that's still a lot,
It's still a lot of freaking people. Yeah, no doubt. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It is on order or pre-order right now. So where can people go to purchase it, and then also when will it actually be released into publishing? So right now you can order on queenthebook.com. There is pre-order available. The book is physically becoming available December 8th. So it's a little far off into the distance, but right now we have the standard edition available. We have an edition that's signed by me, and then we have an edition that a limited number that are signed by me and by Bianca, who's on the cover. Oh wow! So yeah, so right now you can. That's the best place to go to is just queenthebook.com. If you forget that, you can go to my social media, and I'll be plugging it all day every day. So. It'll be easy. It'll be easy to find until December. Yeah, until Christmas, I will be plugging this book. Damn it. Yeah, I am exclusively queenthebook.com. My feed is exclusively going to be Queen the Book. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, exactly. Yeah. No one else. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Aaron. I really appreciate it. It's incredible to have you back on as a special bonus episode. And yes, Queen, we will definitely, I look forward to purchasing the book and also getting to see your incredible portraits inside of it. So thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me again. I love being on here and I'm grateful to have the opportunity. So thanks.
Thank you so much for watching and listening to this week's episode of the Creative Lotus Podcast. A huge thank you to Aaron J. Young for this bonus episode and for sharing an exclusive about his book, Queen, which will be released on December 8th. This week's Buddhist quote of the week is, "The teachings of Buddhism were expounded for the happiness of all people. There is no discrimination based on gender, race, education, or social status. In fact, Buddhism was expounded precisely so as to enable the discriminated and oppressed, those who have experienced the bitterest sufferings, to attain supreme happiness," by Daisaku Ikeda. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Go ahead and give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts if you wouldn't mind. It really helps out. If you're watching here on YouTube, give us that big old thumbs up and go ahead and check out this full episode right here. And until then, I say see you later and have a wonderful week. What is up, Creative Lotus family? Thank you so much for supporting the Creative Lotus Podcast. Go ahead and follow us on social media. On Facebook, we're at the Creative Lotus Podcast. Here on YouTube, maybe you're watching, we're at the Creative Lotus Podcast as well. And on Instagram, we're at the Creative Lotus Pod. And my personal handle is at Alan Zaki. We say thank you once again. Go ahead and subscribe, listen, write a review. And until the next episode, we'll see you there. Have a wonderful day and stay safe. Bye-bye.